My name is Rob Jaczkowa. I'm the chair of music production and engineering here at Berklee College of Music in Boston.
And I'm Dan Thompson. I'm the assistant chair of music production engineering.
The MP&E major has been in existence for 36 years. It became MP&E in 1983. And we teach the craft of record production and record engineering, audio engineering. So the curriculum is fairly evenly divided between learning how to be a producer and what being a producer and that collaborative skill means, and the technicalities of learning to be a recording engineer. So it's two different subjects combined into one. The production, which is creative and business, and the engineering, which is highly technical.
So one of the big advantages that MP&E students have is that they're all first musicians. So students apply to Berklee, they audition on their instrument. Their first year at Berklee is spent entirely doing music primarily. So once they're ready to jump into their major as music production engineering students, they all speak the language of music. So when working with artists, they're able to speak about song form and they're able to read scores, and that's a huge advantage when dealing with the more technical topics. Really, it's all about the music first and then learning the tools to be able to translate that into what we call a record, a final production.
Well, I think stylistic diversity is very important. You know, of course, at Berklee, we don't teach one style of music. It's very broad. And to be an effective record producer, I think you really need a broad vocabulary of all different kinds of music. You don't know how you're going to earn a living over a 45-year career. And so we all have our specialties of music that we like, but in order to be a true professional, you need to be able to do many styles of music. So you need to produce jazz, you need to understand classical music, you need to know what bluegrass and hip hop and R&B, what these different genres, what they imply, because they're all constructed slightly differently. There are conventions and expectations for every style of music that are specific to that audience. People that love hip hop look for certain things in a hip hop track that attract them to those artists, and you need to know what that vocabulary is and how those building blocks work. So we think it's very important that our musicians, as Dan said, everyone is a musician first, have a broad vocabulary so that you can work over a long period of time. If you only do one thing, that one thing will not be popular in 5 years and you won't work. So, you know, a true professional has a 45-year career. That's a long time. So we need to be able to do many things.
That's, again, one of the beauties at Berklee is that we have 4,500 hand-picked musicians from around the world, 100 different countries represented. So all styles of music, all kinds of instruments and players, singers, styles, and that's a really sort of rare and unique opportunity for a student who's studying music production engineering. Very unusual and pretty special.
I mean, good personal skills, communication, interpersonal skills, communication, the ability to be a leader, but also to listen. You know, good producers are paid to have a vision, but good producers also listen to their artists first. So when we come in, we have a game plan for the day, but a good producer uses his or her musicality and their understanding of working with artists to give the artists the ability to express themselves, even if you have a plan as a producer. Producers are also responsible for the business aspect of the deal, the real money that's paying your engineering fees and your clients, your musicians that play on your sessions. So the producer is responsible to whomever is releasing the work, a record company for a film, for instance. So sometimes there is a conflict between the business agenda of the project and the artistic goal of your artist. Those don't always match up, and a good producer is skilled in the diplomacy of speaking with people to manage both of those ideas. Somebody's paying for this. This is a product that needs to be commercialized, and yet there's an artistic statement being made. And so some people would argue that those are always in conflict with each other, but that's the business, that's the job of a producer. So there's areas of responsibility and communication that are different than the strict technicalities of being a recording engineer. Those are different jobs, and that's why, as Dan said, we have producers working with engineers, and yet you're the same person. At 2 o'clock, you're a producer. At 4 o'clock, you're an engineer. And in each of those settings, you are paired up with the other job, and the two of you as a team then go to produce the product.
We actually have some courses that are specifically for players to learn how to be in the studio, because it's a different thing to play live and to play in the studio are quite different things. Part of it is negotiating just the space and interfacing with the technology and interfacing with the personnel, engineers, producers, etc. Part of the goal of an engineer and a producer, the player very comfortable in the space. So it is an artificial construct. Being in a recording studio is somewhat artificial.
Somewhat intimidating for many players.
Exactly, and what you're hoping for is actually for the players to play the way they would when they're rehearsing together or when they're playing on stage. Right. And so there are all sorts of strategies to try to make the technology disappear, to try to make the space inviting, and to enable creativity to flow without impediments. And that can be challenging given all of the technology and the restrictions. So part of what our students need to develop as budding producers and engineers is, well, how do you make the player comfortable, the artist comfortable? How do you gain the trust so that we can be creative together, eliminate some of the intimidation factor of being in the studio?
It's really about trust. You know, it's a very vulnerable position to be an artist, to express your inner feelings, things that are emotional and personal to you. That's intimidating to do in front of people, behind the glass, everyone's looking at you, engineers twiddling knobs and looking at you, the producer, everyone is making a judgment. And for a player, that can be very intimidating. So the idea, as Dan said, is to create an environment of trust. And we need to be able to try things that don't work. And we also need to be able to disagree that maybe in the big picture, this is why the objectivity of a producer is important, because the artist always thinks that what they're doing is right because they did it. They wrote the song. They thought it was good. And a producer says it is good, but it could be better. And these are the ways constructively that we can move this forward and still achieve your vision, but refine, focus that lens a little bit tighter. So for engineers, even though it's a technical job, you still need to have those personal skills, because it is intimidating going in and microphones are looking at you and cameras are on. That is intimidating, and I think the best engineers just make it a very comfortable environment. We talk to the players. I'm a musician, but I'm also an engineer, so I can talk to the drummer. Hey, you know, what kind of sticks are you using? Wow, tell me about that cymbal. I've not seen it before. So it's earning the trust of musicians because you empathize with their position. You understand how it might be uncomfortable, and you're doing everything to be friendly and supportive to move this forward. So it's tricky in a genuine way, you know.
Deal with that. So for instance, we have a vocal production class. All of the student producers must go on the other side of the glass and be recorded as vocalists, even if they're not singers, because that's such an important experience of feeling exposed and vulnerable and being sort of in the studio alone, the effect of what someone says on you emotionally. If you're going to produce a vocalist, then you must be produced as a vocalist in order to be able to gain that empathy.
Exactly.
And maybe it spins how you approach the way you speak to a singer, for instance.
Right. Yeah, how we speak to musicians is very important. You know, everyone who's been recorded, you finish playing as a player and you look in the control room and they're talking and you can't hear them. And you're thinking, do they not like me? Are they talking badly about me? So we need to be able to break down that distance between being a player and being inside the control room, and through our communications and how we speak to them when we push the button and what we say to be supportive so they don't feel awkward or alienated. That's not easy to do. I mean, these are general human communication collaborative skills that transcend record making. This is, how do you speak to your wife? How do you speak to your husband? You know, how do we address each other and make everyone feel good about it. So it's not natural without being shown that these are the areas that are difficult.